Hello, everyone. Uh, we are midway through February, but this is our first episode of 2025, right?
Yes, we haven't done one since December. Oh my goodness.
No, because the world has been falling apart.
Right.
Yeah. Um, so happy New Year, even though
Yes.
it's felt like we've lived so many months.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah, 2025 is wild. It's
Yeah.
wild. Um, you know, we'll, today's conversation, we just kind of want to touch base um, on how we've been doing. Curious to hear more about Ashley's experience in Costa Rica because I think the last time we recorded, you weren't there yet,
No.
right? You weren't in Costa Rica yet. So between then and now, you now are there. You're living there.
Yes.
Um, I'm in LA, so I experienced the whole thing with the fires in January. Um, and talk about the astrology behind it all a little bit. So we just want to do a little bit of catch up and see what's been coming up for us because even though we haven't done an episode, you and I have been in communication, and some of our conversations, I think, as always, are they tend to bring in something really profound or just a different understanding of what we're experiencing.
Absolutely. And I was just thinking, I was like, oh my God, the fires. Like when you mentioned that, I was like, yes. And that too, like that is not so long ago, but it feels like a lifetime
Right.
has been lived with everything that's been going on. Um,
Yeah.
do you want to share anything about your experience or how?
Yeah, it was an interesting experience to have in that first of all it was scary, right? It was
Mm,
scary. My mom lives near one of the mountain ranges that caught fire, but she was still far enough for her to not have to evacuate. But considering that at the time the winds were so strong and volatile, the fire was moving so quickly, fires everywhere were moving so quickly. So that was like a huge concern. Where I live is more like in the middle, so we're more in the city, so we're surrounded by the mountain ranges that caught fire.
mm,
But we weren't in danger of like having to evacuate. So it was, we were getting all of like the really horrible air, um,
wow.
because of everything that was burning around us. So it was it was scary, it was worrisome, it was sad,
Mm,
and it was interesting because it just gave me more, I don't know, I felt more love and appreciation for the city that I'm from.
mm,
Like, I think a lot of times LA gets a bad rap, and I think for the wrong reasons. Um it's criticized a lot for being this place that's just superficial and celebrity culture and awful things, like people are just fake. And to be quite honest, I was born and raised here, and that was very, very rarely ever my experience. It was
mm,
never, it was never an experience. I don't think it was ever really an experience like that. I mean, you run into certain people throughout your life, but that had nothing to do with me, right? To me,
right.
LA is a beautiful city. It's a hub of different cultures.
Mm,
Uh, so it really reignited that love for my hometown, and seeing people come together, to donate, to volunteer, was just, it happened almost overnight, where it
mm,
was almost like the entire city agreed to mobilize, and it did.
mm,
um so it was an interesting time of a lot of love, but also grief and fear and concern. And my birthday was in the middle of it all. So it was an interesting birthday as well.
Mm.
Hmm.
Yeah, wow. Um, I remember being in New York City. I feel like those two cities, I'm not saying other cities don't have it, but when things go down, there's something about being in those two larger cities that the community element just rises. And I remember you talking about it. As scary as it was, you felt so loved and held. And there
Hmm.
seems like there was so much generosity and helpers. The thing I from afar witnessing what was so beautiful is watching the helpers come and watching people rise to the occasion from all over, um,
Hmm.
to care and just see what they could do to organize help. It was really fascinating to witness, like, during such an interesting transition and an interesting time, so much love rising,
Hmm.
you know, and that the both could exist at the same time, the terrible and the beautiful.
Yes.
That's what it looked like from afar. And I was like overcome with emotion often at the palpable feeling of that.
Hmm. Hmm. I mean, that's amazing that you're able to describe it in that way, and you not be here, because that's
Yeah.
exactly what it felt like. It was a very visceral, palpable experience of holding both that love and gratitude, and
Mhm.
um, the understanding of the devastation that we were experiencing as a city, but a lot of people who lost everything,
Mhm.
you know? So it's so weird. Like what I'm feeling right now as we're talking about it, it's like I said, it's mid February, right? It's February 12th today as we record this, and it feels like so long ago.
Yeah.
That's insane to me.
Mhm.
And I think that has, we can dive into it a little bit later, but I think that has a lot to do with the collective spiritual awakening that we're experiencing, where
Mhm.
things are happening so quickly. Um, but the elevation of consciousness is there energetically. We are being invited to grow into a different understanding of life and our role in it.
Mhm.
And that's where I think timelines collapse. It's like
Mhm.
it really brings the question about what is time.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Well, what were you gonna say?
No, nothing.
Oh, I remember saying to you earlier this week that there's this feeling of presence is vital. Presence
Hmm.
is vital because things are moving fast, and it just feels like live now is the message I'm getting. Live now. And that's not I don't mean to sound dark when I say that. It's like there's no time to check out. There's no more time to waste time. Live now, love now, be in the moment now, be
Hmm.
aware now. Like it feels like a pressure cooker saying, pay attention, wake up, be here, connect, love. And then at the same time, there's a fragile nature to this moment because it is changing. It kind of reminds me of like crystallized, like as it's being crystallized, you could touch it and it could melt or collapse or whatever. And I don't mean again that in a dark sense. It just things are not the same and things are not going to be the same. And
Right.
that's also leaves a lot of room for possibility and beauty. Uh, but I've just noticed like now is vital.
Yeah. And to your point, I think the difference between this moment in time and maybe even just 6 months ago or a year ago is that it's not that the now was never fragile. It's
Right.
that the now has always been fragile, because the now
Mhm.
is all that's ever existed and that ever exists at any
Yeah.
given moment, right? The difference is that we really are being smacked and saying, pay attention to the now. And
Yes.
so it's happening in such a way where it's so unavoidable, where we can't
Right.
outthink it, right? And right now, what I'm noticing is that for anyone who tries to not be in the present moment and tries to like escape through whatever, right? Particularly through the phone right now, through the scrolling, there's an immense amount of suffering.
Mhm. Oh my God.
there's an immense amount of suffering. And I can understand that there are things happening worldwide, um, that can feel scary, because change at a global collective level is terrifying.
Mm.
It's redefining everything internally and externally. Of course, that's terrifying. And to not be present for ourselves and in love and in our well being simply by minding our peace, it's going to, I think it can lead to spinning out and getting swept away by everything very, very quickly.
So quickly. And it's weird you said, not weird. It's interesting you said mind your peace, because I've been saying to my husband and my son, like, protect your peace,
Mm,
protect what you go into. And I was like, it's like taking a sponge bath. The minute you go in, I haven't been in a couple days because I'm just like, I just can't. But it's literally like just sponging the collective energy on you. And there's beautiful on there, but there's also a lot of intensity, and there's also a lot of illusion and fear and drama and all of it. And it's like, do you want to take a sponge bath with all that energy right now?
yeah.
And if you do, how are you going to cleanse yourself? How are you going to come back to center? How are you going to protect your peace, taking all that in? And I've
Absolutely.
noticed some people, that I've followed are leaving social media. People are taking breaks, and I think that's fascinating.
Yeah,
It's an interesting time.
I agree. I
Yeah.
think that there is, this awakening is really making people ask, like, what's the point? Like,
Yeah.
what is, if you're present enough and you're minding your peace in that space, you are reminded of the truth of who you really are.
Mm.
So then you're able to ask different questions about why you do the things you do in this human existence. And I think that that's the point right now,
Mhm.
you know?
Yeah.
Um, I am curious though, now that you're in Costa Rica, at this point you've been there. How long have you been? Like 3 weeks? Four? Has it
It'll
been four
be
weeks?
a month. It's a month today. It's today the 13th. No, a month tomorrow.
Tomorrow, right? How are you experiencing this energy? How does it feel different than from when you left? Although in the last month, things have changed so much so quickly,
Mhm.
you know?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think I mentioned that we've moved here indefinitely. Um, and it's wild to watch. It's wild to experience so much contrast between living in the United States and being here. And first, I just want to say I feel so much more at home here than I've felt. I don't know the last time I felt at home in the United States. Like, this is my soul home. I really think so. My human is getting used to a lot of things, like little things, not anything big. Like, I find living here easy. Um, but my soul is very happy. I mean, it's wild, like I was just telling you a minute ago, I have to be mindful of the dogs because there are things everywhere, I just don't, my dogs just can't go run free. I have to be mindful. We're living in the jungle. Um, but I never felt at home in the States. The culture of the United States doesn't make sense to me. It never has. I think you and I
Mhm.
talked about it once. It's always felt like a dysfunctional family to me. And
Yeah.
our choice to leave was very intentional. Of just feeling, especially where I was living, it didn't feel right or harmonious. And what's interesting is I felt like, Charleston is rated the top place to live in the country and has been probably repeatedly. So it was a little confusing to me why a year after being there, I lived there for 10 years, why I couldn't accept it or I didn't want to be there.
Yeah.
Um, and I just realized it just wasn't home. It just wasn't my home. And that's not saying
Right.
anything about anyone that chooses to live there or anything. I'm just recognizing as I'm sitting here in this place, like, this feels like home to me. This makes sense to me. And immediately, one of the things I noticed is the reverence for the earth. Like, it's nobody even has
Mhm.
to say it, it's just naturally here. And we live in a community where if you use too much water, you get fined. I love that. Like,
Mhm.
there is this overindulgence of, like, the word isn't coming to me, but things like water and food and things like that we take for granted easily in the States because no one is limiting or being mindful of our resources, right?
Resources. Uh-huh.
We have unlimited resources all the time. So take the longest shower you want. It doesn't matter. Let the water run, leave the fridge open. I'm just thinking of like the way I've observed or just this, it's easy to be mindless there because there's no checks and balances.
Right.
If you have enough money to pay your utility bill, not everybody has that. So of course, like if you don't have enough money to do that in the States, like you have to be more mindful. But there is this feeling of, well, you can just get more, right? Or you can just order from Amazon, or you can just like, that's kind of in the culture. Does that make sense?
Yeah,
Like
of
it's just,
course.
it'll always be available to you. And so immediately when you get here, there's this mindfulness of like, every plastic bag that comes my way, like if there's something I buy, like I wash it and save it so that I can go to the market and you reuse it. Like I'm mindful of water. I take like showers, I turn off the water, I turn it on. I'm mindful when I'm washing dishes. Like, and I love that. Like there's something about it that makes sense to me that makes
Mhm,
me happy because I
mhm,
feel like I'm in communion with the earth and her cycles here, which we're in a dry season. We
mhm.
have like 3 more months of a dry season and it doesn't rain for like 6 months. So
Right.
I feel like that is fascinating to me. And then I was just saying to you that like food spoils here quickly. Like
Mhm.
I don't know what the fuck is going on with like some of the stuff in the States that lasts forever. But
Right.
like here, 2 days fresh food is going bad. Like
Mhm,
lettuce, it can live in my fridge in the States for like a couple of weeks. Here, it's
mhm.
gone after 2 or 3 days if you don't use it. Like
Right.
strawberries, milk. So what's really beautiful is we go to the market, everything we buy is fresh. I also think it's interesting. All we do is eat fresh fruit. And my doctor was like, you need to stop eating so much fruit, your blood sugar, high glycemia, all the things, and I'm like, you're sitting here and eating this food and you're not feeling like your sugar level is spiking. You're not
Right.
gaining weight. You're not it like I could go on. It's just the contrast. I was telling you the inflammation in my body and in my family's like inflammation is gone within a
Mhm.
month of being here. So it's fascinating. My kids, they live on like pineapple and watermelon and like homemade tortillas and homemade bread. And I can eat gluten here.
Right.
I'm just like,
Yeah.
um, so, I'm the reverence for the earth, the food is different. Um, I love just the pace is different. What's important feels interesting to me. There is no ladder here. It's a different way of living. You watch people living, that is their life. And
Mhm.
I went and got a coffee the other day, and the woman who made it, we were just chatting, and she was like, Americans are so stressed. And all I could think of is her experience of Americans in that coffee shop particular is mostly tourists. So
Mhm.
Americans are going on vacation and they're stressed. And that's
Right.
her experience of them. And she just said, I don't understand.
Mhm,
Um, and I was like, yeah, isn't that fascinating? It's
mhm.
really fascinating. So I don't mean to slag off America by any means. I do think it's a time to, and it's been for a long time. Like these are all in things I knew intuitively, but to see
Right.
them in my face, I think it's a time to re-examine the way Americans are living and why. And what also are we putting up with that we don't have to,
Mhm,
you
mhm,
know? Like
mhm,
in for ease and comfort, what are we letting slip through our fingers
mm,
that
mhm.
actually is important? And when I
Right.
say that, what comes up for you? I went on a rant.
Oh, it's okay. Um, I just what keeps coming up in what you're saying and just like the observation of my own thoughts and speaking to clients and in readings is that again there is a reframing that is happening
Mhm.
about what's important in life. And this isn't anything that we didn't know. It's just that we were never forced to lean into reconsidering the structures of our lives, because the way our lives have been running so far is so convenient.
Mm-hmm.
And to reconstruct and redefine the foundations from which we live our lives would require immense change
Mm-hmm.
that is very uncomfortable for most people,
Mm-hmm.
right? So, everything you're saying, I think that people are experiencing in different ways in different levels of their life,
Mm-hmm.
because I think that that's what's happening collectively, right?
Mm-hmm.
If we take notice to what certain leaders, right, like political leaders are doing, they're reaching and they're grasping to keep things as they were, because they understand, I think, to an extent, things are changing and we need to get ahead of it. Otherwise, we're going to lose power.
Mm-hmm.
Do you see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So I think it's that. I think fundamentally values are changing, in that they are becoming so much more clear about what's right and what's not.
I
You know what I'm saying?
agree. Yeah. And go
So
ahead.
that comes with a significant reassessment of, what does my life look like? What do I want it to look like? And what is my role in it all?
Mhm.
Yeah.
Well, when you see the rise of authoritarianism, which God, I had hoped we'd outgrown, but when you see authoritarian, like parenting is run through fear. So when you see
Mhm.
an authoritarian government rise again, you recognize how afraid they must be because people are changing so much. And
Yes.
And so as I'm watching this like rise of like these tantrums and this bullying and this hate filled, I mean, that's what an authoritarian parent does, tries to control so that things don't change. I mean, authoritarian parents like control the independence and free will of a child so that it can expand and grow and be fluid and become its own sovereign identity. So
Mhm.
you see that happening. And I think you're right. There is a lot of fear. And their fear is bleeding into the collective energy, and people feel that.
Right. And this is why it's been so important, at least for me, and in the things that I've been putting out on YouTube and social media, to remind people that I think right now the most precious resource we have is our attention,
Mhm.
because fear is a tactic.
Mhm.
To play on people's fear is a tactic. And I think that that's something that we really have to acknowledge,
Yes.
because when we do and we come back to self, we recognize the truth of who we really are,
Mhm.
that I am not defined by that. And then the question becomes, well, then what am I defined by and who am I? And those are
Mhm.
much more profound and more enlightening questions to ask and wonder and hold space for, than to, what is this overgrown child going to sign off on now?
Mhm.
You know,
Yeah.
because the more people come back to themselves, the more people really hold space for more profound questions of what their soul is trying to get through right now, the more the collective will change.
Mhm.
Yes, there is a rise in authoritarianism, and there is also a rise of the power of the people.
Mhm.
That's also there too.
Mhm.
So I hope that people realize that this isn't just this isn't just woo-woo stuff. This isn't just like reframing. This isn't just about thinking positively.
No.
I think that the future of the collective truly depends on what we as a collective are focusing on right now. And if we give into the fear, then that's what's going to win. But if we
Mhm.
go within, something else has the possibility to arise.
I totally agree with you. And that's where we find our power. Like when people say, "What can I do now?" What
Mhm.
can I do? Even my son, my 15-year-old was like, "Well, I don't know what to do." And I was like, "Start with yourself." you
Mhm.
know, like when you feel like losing your temper on your brother or like snapping or whatever, you start with yourself. You mind your heart, you mind your energy, you mind your attention. you take care of yourself. And if we were all minding ourselves, if we were all tending to our hearts, think about how different it would feel. Think about how powerful we would be. There's so
Mhm.
much power in going back to love over and over again. And
Mhm.
spinning out in fear is not going to create change. What's going to create change is the resistance that we create by protecting our peace and protecting our joy. Like,
Right.
still finding moments. I sat with a client the other day and she just shared with me this moment of gratitude that she had experienced with her child. And she had tears in her eyes and I had tears in my eyes. And I was just so blown away by that beautiful moment that she was sharing with me, that in the midst of so much, that was so important for her to talk about how much that meant to her. And I'm feeling like the things that we might have taken for granted a few months ago, last year, like, they are precious to us and our attention needs them. Like those moments of generosity, of kindness. And it's really unfortunate that sometimes we have to get uncomfortable to have gratitude for that. But that is the contrast of the human experience. We go
Yes.
dark to appreciate the light. But all that you're saying of like being with our true nature, that's imperative now.
I genuinely believe, I genuinely believe that that's what is going to save the world.
Mhm. I do too. That will be the revolution, right? That like, yes.
Yeah. The revolution of love.
Mhm.
And when you understand that it isn't the way that it's painted, a lot of times to use the words revolution of love uh, can can come off as a little comical,
Mhm.
right? But what we're talking about here is about holding the truth of the shadow that the world is showing us and
Mhm.
holding the grief and the sadness that comes with that and saying, and I am so magical in who I am that I will also find moments of joy and I will also find moments of gratitude in all of this.
Mhm.
That is, like you said, it's imperative right now.
Mhm.
You know, it's, yeah, it's been such an interesting beginning of this year. I mean, just as an individual, the way that I think and see things, it's not that it's different than before. If anything, it's just more reinforced,
Yeah.
you know?
Mhm.
It's like, oh, this is what I've known all along. It's just that for so long, the world didn't reflect that back. And
Yeah.
now, like you said, it's the shadow of the world falling apart that it's that contrast that we needed.
Mhm. And it feels to me like I don't know how much shadow is left.
Right.
I feel like, where it felt like the shadow was being excavated, as I look around, I was like, there's not a lot of shadow left,
Hmm.
Like,
Hmm.
we're looking at the darkness. Like, honestly, the shadow within ourselves, the shadow of the world, like, it is there. Um,
Hmm.
and it's fascinating to watch different people meet that ugliness or that darkness with such ferocity and boldness, like artists and creators. Like, I think it's incredible. I love watching it. So juicy.
Yeah. Yeah.
Seeing how people are like, oh, it's almost as if the excavation of the shadow, like, now we're talking about it. So, oh, I can call it out. I can be in relationship to that. Like, you know what? We're just more honest than we've ever been. And frankly, I'm grateful for that. I'm grateful to see like people finding their voice because it's no longer we're tiptoeing or pretending.
Right. Right. How can you not?
Right.
Like, how can you not have the conversations or point it out or talk about it?
Mhm.
It's so blatant.
It's so blatant. Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
so, you know, um, at, as we record today, we're in the middle of the full moon in Leo energy. And one of the expressions of Leo, which I don't think is talked about enough, is the expression of the heart and what truly
Mhm.
matters, like the heart of the matter, right? And I hadn't realized that when you and I agreed to record today that it was going to be the full moon in Leo. And it hit me yesterday. And I thought, oh, that's going to be an interesting energy to have this conversation under. Because I don't know how you're feeling in this conversation, but I personally feel different.
Mm.
Uh, I can't really put my finger on it, but I don't know if like there's conviction, maybe
Yeah.
conviction, or it feels very Leo like.
Well, does that energy give you permission to just be in the heart?
Mm-hmm.
Just without having, like I said, we don't have to tiptoe around this anymore. Like we can
Mm-hmm.
just, like
Right.
just be in the heart and be bold in your truth and
Mm.
in your self-expression.
Yeah. Yeah.
Mm.
I think it's important to talk about the astrology a little bit so that we have greater context, perhaps a little bit more of a spiritual context, which is, I think, exactly what we're moving through right now. You
Mm.
know, as I mentioned a few moments ago, this is a spiritual awakening.
Mm.
And so I think that a lot of what comes up or what is coming up right now is searching for ways to approach the experiences we're having from a purely logical perspective. And we can't. It's like we've hit a logical wall, right? We've hit a wall where we can't outthink ourselves out of this situation. And I don't think we're meant to. I think we're really meant to be in it in order to fully understand what's actually happening at a soul level.
Mm.
So I bring that up because currently we're experiencing the nodes, the North Node in Pisces and the South Node in Virgo. And so where the nodes are involved, we're talking about the soul's evolution and the soul's lesson in this human life, right? So the best way to put it is like when certain things happen to people that they're like, what the fuck? What just happened? My life just got turned upside down, right?
Mm.
And so much of that has been the beginning of 2025. I think that from a spiritual perspective, when people experience something like that, there's something that the soul came here, signed up for, and said, I'm going to experience that because that's going to teach me something.
Mm.
Well, the North Node in Pisces is the invitation to remember that, to remember that
Mm.
your soul signed up for some lessons that are going to transform and perhaps even destabilize your human experience.
Mm.
But the call of the North Node in Pisces is, can you trust in that which you do not see, fully understand, or, you know, have so much resistance towards?
Mm.
And that's the lesson in itself. That's the growth in itself, because it's like I have no other choice but to surrender to my circumstances, and I hate it, right?
Mm.
And navigating that.
Mm.
And the South Node in Virgo will highlight the shadow of that Virgo energy, but will also highlight the wisdom of that energy, because the
Mm.
South Node represents a remembering of something in a past lifetime.
Mm.
And so, in a lower expression, the South Node in Virgo is, I'm trying to control this situation in ways that I used to because that's what makes me feel safe.
Mm.
I'm trying to control everything and everyone around it. But the South Node will always remind you that doesn't work anymore, and you are not in control right now.
Mm.
The higher expression of the South Node in Virgo is the remembering that life itself is a spiritual experience. And so, what I mean by that is, Virgo is the reminder of when we show up to life day to day and we are present and we mind our peace, we mind where we are, we mind present moment. We are actually creating a connection to our daily life.
Mm.
Virgo is an earth sign. Earth signs in the zodiac ask us, what is the connection to your tangible reality,
Mm.
right? So when we think about it from that perspective, these nodes, I I always wonder how we are actually going to in real time experience the energy of the astrology. Because it's one thing to read about it and study it and put things together, but it's a completely different thing to experience it, because it's not just an individual experience, especially not now. It's a collective experience.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that we're trying to navigate our individual experience while collectively we are in it together.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not about choosing one or the other right now. It's about understanding that it's all happening at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway,
No, I
did all
so
make
appreciate.
sense?
Yes, it did make sense. And I so appreciate it because when you're talking about, there's so many unknowns right now, um,
Mm-hmm,
especially in our country, it's kind of like, who knows what's going to happen day to day. And I think when we're facing, we can't approach that with logic. We can't
right.
approach like the news with logic because it's illogical. We can't, nothing looks the same as it used to. So it pushes us into this place of trust is like
Mm-hmm,
a lifeline.
mm-hmm,
Trust in something bigger, trust that we are held, trusting that we are so much more than this human experience. It really pushes us to that spiritual exploration. It
mm-hmm.
pushes us to that spiritual practice. Like we can't afford to not mind our peace. We just
Right,
can't.
right.
Or the suffering is going to be incredible because the mind is so powerful. And I was thinking this week, I was like, so as we've evolved as humans, where we were probably chasing off bigger predators or like had bigger problems that we were dealing with like thousands of years ago.
Mm-hmm,
Now I think that our biggest, like, and I don't mean to call it a foe, but it is our mind.
mm-hmm,
That is the predator that preys upon us and delivers us so many scary stories. And that is where I see my clients. Their
mm-hmm,
mind is constantly scaring the shit out of them over.
mm-hmm,
And my own mind, like, oh my God, tending to my heart and being in my spiritual practice, like helps me discern the stories of my mind. But as I'm sitting here in this wild jungle and I'm recognizing that, like, yeah, there are things that people deal with, but most of what we're struggling with in our culture is the
mm-hmm.
mind
Yeah.
and our misunderstanding of its purpose and how it operates.
Yes.
And that's
Yes.
where our suffering is coming from, is how we are framing and thinking about things, the stories we're telling. Does that make sense?
100%. 100%. You said something that is really intriguing, which is that our mind is really what, like, I think that is the precious resource right now, right? Our mind, our attention, where is that going?
Mhm.
One of the things we have to keep in mind is that the South Node in Virgo is a sign that is ruled by the planet Mercury. Mercury is the
Mhm.
planet of the mind. And so Virgo is a really beautiful energy in that it has the ability to discern what's what. That is where the description of Virgo being so detail oriented comes from. It has this very innate capacity to be able to sort things out in a way that just other energy doesn't. That's one of its gifts. The problem is that when Virgo energy is not grounded in itself, and by itself, I mean capital S, because the sign directly opposite of Virgo is Pisces.
Mhm.
Pisces is a sign of soul. If you are not in your soul, then your ability to discern becomes distorted because you are not discerning from a place of soul. You are discerning from a place and from things outside of yourself. And
Mhm.
that's where Virgo energy can become incredibly overwhelmed, overcritical, analysis paralysis, like this obsession with survival and getting things right.
Mhm.
It goes out of control very, very quickly if it's not grounded. And
Mhm.
so the South Node in Virgo is really pointing that out in how we're doing that in our day to day,
Mhm.
right? And so the point of it coming up, and I think that this is also something that we need to keep in mind, that a lot of times when certain shadow parts of us come up, they're not coming up because that's who we are. They're not coming up because we haven't overcome them. They're coming up so that we observe them, look at them, and understand, oh, I don't have to choose that. I am not that. I am not defined by that,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
So, right now, as we're moving through these very transformative times, it's so important to not hold on to so much of any of the things that are happening outside of you. Because the fact of the matter is that they're going to happen no matter what. And if we can look at it from a much more expansive perspective, it's part of the process right now of what needs to happen.
Mm-hmm.
Can we trust that what is happening is part of a larger plan? That if we get in touch with the light within and begin to discern who we are from that space, that we actually affect the outcome of what can be.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm sharing all of these things in this way because one of the things that happened in January with all of the fires, and also like I got really, really sick. I don't know what the fuck happened, but I feel like something different in me opened. And I swear to you, I was so sick for a week in bed. I couldn't get out of bed.
Mm-hmm.
Like coming in and out of like fevers and chills and all the things. But I swear to you, I feel like something opened and I had so many downloads, and I feel like this is what's coming out right now.
It's beautiful. I'm here for it.
Yeah.
Well, you had a lot to process. And it sounds like, just like you said, these downloads are coming up, this understanding of how to move through this time. And from a practical place, I think one thing I'm witnessing that we spoke at the beginning is I'm witnessing there's a pivotal moment that if you don't have a spiritual practice or a relationship to your soul, that it's inevitable that you're being called to it. So if someone was like, I don't know where to start,
Mhm.
um, I know for me, I was saying, someone said to me the other day, well, I know I've been doing all the manifestation, I've been dreaming up the life, all the things, but the place where they needed to start was like the narratives and the wounding that doesn't believe that they deserve those things, that is
Mhm.
stuck in trauma response and survival mode. And so I always say, just start where you are. What's present for you right now? If you're afraid, be present for that fear. How can you love yourself through that fear? If you feel lost, how can you be present for feeling lost? Like,
Mhm.
what helps you get into your body? What stills your mind? What softens you? Um, what is your relationship to all these things? Like, and what would you say?
Yeah. Again, just to bring it back to the astrology so it continues to make more sense. The North Node in Pisces, again, is the invitation to trust in your connection to source
Mm-hmm.
and to develop the connection to source. So, how do you do that? You do it through the means of the South Node in Virgo. And what is that? The higher expression of the South Node in Virgo is how am I present on my data in my day to day? How am I
Mm-hmm.
minding my thoughts? Where is my mind when I'm doing the dishes? Where is my
Mm-hmm.
mind when I'm driving? Right? Can I remember to practice presence at every moment in my life? Because that is what's going to let me know, oh, I'm sad right now. Oh, I'm pissed right now.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, I'm reactive when I drive.
Mm-hmm.
And that's something that I want to be mindful of because I don't want to have an accident, cause an accident. It's in these everyday things. I think one of the things that has happened with the concept of spirituality, I think it kind of took the same route that religion did, which is it has to look this way. You have
Mm-hmm.
to go do this. So you have a spiritual practice. You have to go do yoga. You have to go meditate. You have to do things in a certain way. Now,
Buy
I'm
the
not saying
things, wear the things, all the things. Yes.
exactly, exactly. And I'm not saying that there's anything wrong with that. But what matters is the intention behind why you're doing the things you're doing. Because the fact of the matter is that the connection to source is not anything that you ever have to go out and search for. It is
Mhm.
always there.
Mhm.
You just have to open your heart up to it and invite it in. Because source is also never intrusive. Source is never
Mhm.
going to force you to anything,
No.
right? And so again, Virgo is this reminder, and this energy, by the way, lasts through mid 2026. And it's going to be the practice of remembering that life itself is a spiritual practice if we connect with it intentionally.
Mhm.
But if we are distracted by every single little thing that happens in the world, we're going to miss the connection to our life and therefore the connection to source.
Mhm. It's so beautifully put. I don't have anything to add to that. It's so beautiful. I mean, that's what like it's all asking is for us to be with our true nature, which
Yeah,
is source energy.
right. You
Mhm.
know, I think one of the most common things I've been hearing lately is like how quickly time feels like it's passing by, and um, how people feel like I've lived so many lifetimes in just a week. Yeah, that's real. Like that is a real occurrence. And you and I were talking about this a few days ago, where one of the downloads I had was the manifestation of our thoughts is going to, I think, as time moves forward, especially as Uranus moves into Gemini, as more planets switch signs, the manifestation of our thoughts is going to be almost immediate.
Mhm.
Like whether they're, for lack of better terms, whether they're positive or negative, we're going to see like the manifestation of our thoughts almost immediately. And one of the things that I want to make clear is that this isn't about like, oh, I must be hyper vigilant of all of my thoughts so that nothing bad ever happens. No, because you will create something you don't want from that space. The point is for us to become aware of where the mind is,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
This isn't about getting it right. This is about remembering that the mind is a servant of the soul, not the other way around. Yeah.
Yes. And remembering that fear-based thoughts are so they operate in such a lower vibration than love and love-based thoughts. So people can get, well, I was thinking scary thoughts. I was thinking scary thoughts. Am I bringing that into my life? And it's like, no, be compassionate with any scary thoughts, but understand that when you're in those higher vibrational frequencies for joy, love, wanting something, creating something that is happening faster, that the capacity for that, the availability for that is. And we should always be mindful of our scary thoughts only because just thinking scary thoughts makes us feel afraid. Like the body responds immediately. So it's
Mhm.
not like that thing is going to happen, but the body's already having an experience of it. Uh, so it's always important to like notice this with gentleness and compassion, but tending to the mind, like pruning like you would a beautiful flower. What am I selecting mindfully that I want to bring into my consciousness, my awareness? How do I want to move through my day and what do I want to give my attention to?
Right. Right.
Hmm.
I think that's so powerful. I think that's so powerful. It reminds me of, certain teachings, like even Eckhart Tolle's The Power of Now, or David Hawking's the Map of Consciousness Explained. Like all of these teachers that wrote about these things that were way ahead of their time. I realize that now, way, way ahead of their time. But I think that now is really when it makes the most sense.
Hmm.
Like I think about those books and I think about some of the teachings and I realize, oh, this is how it lands. This is really what they meant.
Hmm.
Um, yeah, it's a fascinating time to be alive. It's a fascinating time to be alive. It's a fascinating time to be in a space of holding space for others.
Mhm.
Um, yeah.
It really is. It's a fascinating time to be a space holder where it's not, your client isn't just going through it, you're going through it as well. Like there you going, we're going through our individual experiences, but even in Costa Rica, I'm I'm still affected by what's happening in the States. I mean, my physical location is different, but energetically, and being a
Mhm.
citizen of there, it's not like I'm separate from that, but we're all feeling this collective energy. So it is, I've never in the time that I've been a space holder felt anything like this. It's
Yeah.
really, it, it's, it's a powerful, just palpable time. It's so potent, the energy.
Mhm.
Yeah.
So, how does that make you feel? Or does it redefine a little bit? Or is it happening, the redefinition of what you do for a living?
Can you say that a different way? I need to.
Yeah. Like, how is it, or does it, everything we're experiencing collectively, does it change the way you see being a space holder and being a therapist and being an intuitive at this moment in time?
That's a really good question. Um, yes, it has made me more
Mm.
conscious and of even more of how I have to care for myself.
Mhm.
How I have to tend to. I initially I was really triggered by the election. Having been raised by someone who's mentally ill and a bully, and I'm sorry, this is my own personal opinion, but having someone who's been accused of rape, having my own sexual assault trauma, all this stuff, I was really
Mhm.
triggered, and the world felt very unsettling. And I was like, and then listening to clients talk about their experience of it, and then noticing like I felt like I was going to have a panic attack a couple of times, and having to really mind my body and my nervous system and understand what this meant. The human aspect of me, it brought up a lot.
Mhm.
And so it just made me aware of how much I have to care for myself. Um, and also, I feel like there's a bigger hold to offer.
Mhm.
Um, I'm noticing that this work is more important than ever. And I don't
Mhm.
mean that from an egoic standpoint. People need to be held. They need to be held. They need to be guided. They need to be supported. Compassion is the medicine right now. Compassion, like letting people move at their pace without agenda. Um, just having a lot of love, seeing the soul underneath the human
Mhm.
is really important right now. Um, Working through like some, and not with clients, but working through my own resistance to that sometimes. Like, I don't want to see that. Fuck them. They're awful. Again, not my clients, but people in the world, like working through, like, this is the time for seeing the soul underneath the human. This is the time for compassion. This is the time to move in a different way. So I think I'm having to like rewire some of the ways that I hold space because I've never done this before. Like I can have my own trauma and sit with someone else's trauma, but this feels like, oh, we're all in this together. Shit. Like, it's just new and it's different.
Yeah.
Does that make sense? Like, and it's just holding that spiritual consciousness, like making it an ever present part of a session for me, even if my client doesn't hold that same belief system. But it has to be a part of it always. It always is, but I have to hold it so intentionally.
Right.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I don't think it's quite as clear to me yet. I think I'm still processing, but I hope that
Mhm.
made sense.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that makes total sense.
Mm-hmm.
I think, yeah, it's again that redefining of everything,
Mm-hmm.
including how we do this work.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. How do you experience it?
Um, I think that there was again, when I got sick, I felt like I went through something beyond just being sick. And I wonder how much of that actually affected like my physical body, because I haven't been sick like that in a very long time.
Mm,
Uh, I think it just reinvigorated my sense of purpose in the world.
mhm.
Like truly, it's like this landing I had of like, it's not an accident that you do what you do at this moment in time.
No,
It's
it's
not
not.
an accident that you have been, it's almost like I felt like I've been preparing for this moment in time for the last 10 years of my life.
Mm.
Thank God.
Yes.
You know,
Thank God. Thank God to have the practice. Thank
to
God.
have practice, to have just a different understanding or additional understanding. And that's not to say that I don't have, I don't know, worries or concerns, but even that, I think I've been going back and forth within myself. Like when things get hard in my life, I go into like my warrior mode,
Mm,
you know? And I think there's a little bit of that right now. But I also think that that's a little ancestral. It's like
mm,
I've been on journeys and I've had meditations where my ancestors have spoken to me and they've said, "You're a teacher." Right. And so in the past, that has looked like what? Like an astrology teacher? Okay. Like that's what I teach. But I feel like there is a greater understanding of that now.
mm,
I don't think I have the answers. I just think I meant to share what comes through me. And that's that. Right.
mm,
But I do have a connection to an ancestral lineage that it was very wise
mm,
and very connected to the earth and very connected to other ways of understanding life and how life works and our place in it, our place in the world. And so all of that has been coming through for me
mm,
um, since the beginning of the year
mm.
and really since getting sick.
That's so beautiful. Yeah, to just have that clarity of purpose and to feel your ancestors around them.
Mhm.
And I think we need to be in touch with those connections. I think we need to know that we're not alone right now, that there are helpers in spirit in the universe to guide us
Yeah.
through this time.
Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah. So I'm curious to see, you know, what else unfolds. Uh, we are about to start eclipse season at the end of February, right? We're going to move through eclipse season, March and April.
Mm.
I the eclipse guide for this eclipse season, the first eclipse season of 2025, is already up on sale on the Astro Consciousness store. It's $25. I really, really invite you all to pick it up. You have a workbook. I've added prompts in there that are meant to just guide you through this time.
Mm.
2025 is a different animal. It's different. And I think that if we feel that we have grown and evolved as much as we have since January, I think it's going to be like times 20 between March and April.
Oh, I believe it. I totally
Yeah.
believe it. Oh, I'm
Yeah.
so glad that's up. I can't wait to pick it up.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, thank you. Does this feel complete?
Yeah, it does.
Yeah.
What a lovely conversation.
Yeah. Thank you all for listening. We're always grateful for your feedback. We're grateful that you listen or watch. If you are on YouTube and you haven't subscribed yet, please subscribe. You can watch us have these conversations. And we're just, thank you. And we're sending love out to all of you during this interesting and beautiful time.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you all so much. Thank you so much for watching. Be sure to hit the like and subscribe button and hit that notification bell to be updated on new videos.
Click the video on screen to watch more episodes.